My name is Margaret. And the night the phone rang at 3 a.m., everything tilted. I was half asleep, the kind of fog where you can't tell if the sound is real or a dream, but the voice on the other end cut through me like glass. It was my maid of honor, Leah, her words stumbling over each other. Claire, it's your parents. They're gone. They left. That morning was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The day I finally stood before the man I loved more than anything, surrounded by friends and family. But instead of joy, I was handed a single brutal note left at the front desk of their hotel. Let's see how you face the guests now. 7 words that carried the weight of every slight, every absence, every cruel dismissal of my existence over 27 years. It wasn't enough for them to abandon me. They wanted me humiliated. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from those who should have loved you most, you know the way it leaves a mark you can't quite scrub clean. That's why I share my story, because none of us should carry that burden alone. I grew up in West Philadelphia in a modest red brick house, whose cracked foundation mirrored the fractures in our family long before I understood them. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden child, and I was, well, background noise. My life was measured not in milestones but in shadows. His soccer trophies on the mantle, his new bikes on the porch, his endless list of needs that always seemed to matter more. I still remember being 7, clutching the shoebox that held the first thing I'd ever bought for myself after months of saving quarters and dimes. Plain black school shoes. I thought my mother would be proud, but as I laced them up in the kitchen, Ryan wheeled in on a brand new cherry red bike, chrome fenders sparkling in the sun. Just because, she said, smoothing his hair with the tenderness I ached for. When I lifted my shoes for her to see, she glanced at them briefly. That's nice, dear. Don't scuff them. Different rules, different needs, a different kind of love. By the time I was 10, I learned not to expect applause. My spelling bee trophy gathered dust in my room while Ryan's participation medals gleamed in the living room. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my parents didn't come. They stayed home because Ryan had twisted his ankle at football practice. I walked across that stage alone, the sound of other families cheering their children burning like salt on an open wound. College became my escape hatch. Temple University was only a train ride away, but it might as well have been another country. I worked 3 jobs, coffee shop mornings, library nights, weekend babysitting, because I knew asking for help was pointless. Meanwhile, Ryan dropped out of community college twice, and my parents covered his rent, his car payments, his business ventures that went under faster than they began. Landscaping, sports memorabilia, a food truck that never left the driveway. Each failure swallowed their money whole, and each time they said he was finding himself. When I finally graduated with honors, they came to the ceremony, but left before my name was called. Ryan had a baseball game. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, my resolve hardened. I would build a life so solid it no longer needed their approval. So I left for Boston with 2 suitcases and a job at a marketing firm that promised nothing but a chance. My parents called me selfish for moving so far away, but the truth was, I had never felt closer to home. And it was there, in Boston, that I met Adam Whitaker, the man who would change everything. It happened at the Children's Hospital Gala, one of those glittering events where the air is thick with perfume and philanthropy. I was darting between tables, clipboard in hand, when I rounded a corner too fast and sent a glass of sparkling water cascading down the front of a stranger's suit. Mortified, I babbled apologies, fumbling with napkins. But instead of irritation, he laughed, a warm, unguarded laugh that seemed to steady me. "Don't worry," he said, green eyes crinkling at the edges. "You might have just saved me from bidding on a vase I didn't want." His name was Adam, and for the rest of the evening, we talked as if we'd known each other for years. We covered everything from hidden corners of the city to pizza toppings, and when he asked me to dinner, I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. That first date was in a cozy Italian spot in the North End. The pasta was good, the wine better, but it was the way Adam listened, really listened, that left me disarmed. When I told him about working 3 jobs through college, about carving out a career on my own, his admiration felt real. "That kind of drive is rare, Claire," he said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed it. By the 3rd date, when he showed me the community garden where he volunteered, Kneeling in the dirt beside children planting tomato seedlings, I knew I was in trouble. This wasn't a man who just talked about being good. He was good. For 6 months, our lives intertwined. He drove an unremarkable sedan, lived in an unpretentious apartment, preferred walks along the Charles River to lavish outings. And then, one night at the Museum of Fine Arts, everything shifted. From the moment we arrived, it was clear Adam wasn't just another guest. The mayor greeted him like an old friend. CEOs sought him out. The staff addressed him with reverence. Confused, I finally asked, "Why does everyone here know you?" His answer landed like a stone in my chest. "My full name is Adam Whitaker, of Whitaker Properties." The Whitakers weren't just wealthy, they were Boston royalty. Their name was etched into the city skyline itself. I remember standing in his apartment later that night, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because people change when they know," he said, frustration in his eyes. "They stop seeing me and start seeing money. I wanted you to know me first." For days, I wrestled with it. The chasm between his world and mine. But when he looked at me and asked softly, "Does this change things?" I realized the truth. The man who knelt in a garden with kids, who knew how I took my coffee, who listened when I spoke, that was still him. "I fell in love with you, Adam," I told him. "Not your last name." His parents, Jonathan and Margaret, turned out to be nothing like the caricatures I expected. Jonathan, a self-made man, despite his fortune, shook my hand firmly and cracked bad jokes. Margaret, elegant but warm, welcomed me as though she'd been waiting years for her son to find someone who grounded him. "You keep him real," she said one evening on Cape Cod. A year and a half later, Adam proposed in that same garden, on a checkered blanket, surrounded by tomato plants. The ring was simple, elegant. My yes was immediate. We planned a small wedding at a restored estate in Vermont, just 20 guests. His parents supported us completely, content to let the day be ours. For the first time in my life, I felt what unconditional support looked like, which made me bold enough, foolish enough, to hope that maybe, just maybe, my own family would show up for me this time. I called them with trembling hands. "Mom, Dad, I'm engaged." Silence. Then my mother's voice, cool and flat. "Well, who is he?" Not congratulations. Not joy, just suspicion. "He works in real estate development," I said carefully, avoiding the name. When they finally met him, their questions were sharp, invasive. Ryan sprawled across my sofa, smirking. "Finally landed yourself a Brahmin," he sneered, like it was a punchline. But the second they stepped into the Whitaker penthouse for dinner 2 months later, everything changed. Suddenly, they were all smiles, fawning and obsequious. My father cornered Jonathan to pitch Ryan's latest brilliant scheme. My mother whispered angrily, "Why didn't you tell us Adam was that Whitaker?" That night, in Adam's arms, I wept. They don't care about me. They just see opportunity. And as the wedding drew closer, their demands grew bolder. Lists of their friends they insisted be invited. Threats of not attending if I didn't bend. Accusations of selfishness when I said no. And still, I held on to hope. The week before the wedding, my mother called with a final demand. She had already invited 2 couples I'd explicitly left off the guest list. "They're expecting to come, Claire," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. I felt something inside me snap. "No," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "This is my wedding. They're not coming." "Don't be so selfish," my father barked in the background. Ryan's laugh carried through the line. "Classic Claire, thinks she's better than us just because she married into money." The words tumbled out of me, hot and sharp. "Better? I spent my whole life invisible while you were handed everything. I worked 3 jobs through college while you got second chances bought and paid for. If wanting a wedding that's actually about me makes me selfish, then fine. I'll wear the crown." My mother's voice went cold. "If that's how you feel, then maybe we won't come at all." For once, I wasn't afraid. "That's your choice," I said, and hung up. The morning of the wedding dawned bright. The sky a cruel shade of blue, as if mocking the storm inside me. In the bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids, I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. By 9:30, when my parents still hadn't arrived, Leah called their hotel. No answer. She tried Ryan. Nothing. An hour later, I called the front desk myself. The clerk's voice was kind, pitying. "I'm sorry, Miss Donovan. They checked out early this morning. They did leave a note for you." Leah returned with the envelope, her face pale. My hands shook as I opened it, the words stabbing through me. "Let's see how you face the guests now." Clipped behind it was a receipt for 3 first-class tickets to Paris. Their absence wasn't an oversight. It was an act of cruelty. They hadn't just abandoned me. They wanted to see me broken. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter falling from my hands, my vision blurred with tears. Then Adam walked through the door. He broke every wedding tradition, striding in before the ceremony, gathering me into his arms without hesitation. "This is still our day," he whispered fiercely. "They can't take that from us. The people who love you are here." Within the hour, his parents arrived. Margaret knelt beside me, her hand warm around mine. "Claire," she said softly, "we know we can't replace them, but Jonathan would be honored to walk you down the aisle, if you'll have him." I could only nod, tears spilling over. For the first time that day, they weren't tears of pain, but of gratitude. And then came a knock at the door. When it opened, I froze. My Aunt Rachel, my mother's estranged sister, a woman I hadn't seen in over a decade, stood there with the same green eyes I saw in the mirror. "Adam called me," she said, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "There's no way I was letting you do this alone." With Jonathan steady at my side, Aunt Rachel holding my hand, I walked down that sunlit aisle. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman?" Jonathan's voice rang out, proud and sure. "Her aunt, my wife, and I do." And in that moment, as Adam's eyes found mine, shining with love, I understood my parents hadn't taken anything from me. They had given me freedom. The ceremony unfolded like something out of a dream, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. When Jonathan placed my hand in Adam's, the world steadied. My parents' empty chairs at the back of the room were like dark holes in the fabric of the day, but they no longer pulled at me. My eyes were fixed on Adam, on the man who had chosen me without conditions. The vows we spoke were simple, stripped bare of pretense. Adam's voice trembled only once, when he promised, "You will never stand alone again." My own words spilled out with a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. "I choose you, not for what you have, but for who you are." When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the cheer that rose up felt like a tidal wave of love crashing over us. At the reception, as twilight gave way to stars, I found myself surrounded by a different kind of family. Friends who had stood by me through late nights and heartbreaks. Colleagues who had cheered each of my small victories. Adam's parents, treating me as though I'd always been theirs. Aunt Rachel, who told me over champagne that she had kept photos of me all these years, tucked secretly in her dresser drawer. There were moments of ache, of course, when the band played the father-daughter dance and I stayed seated, hands clasped in my lap, but then Jonathan appeared, extending his hand with a soft smile. "May I?" he asked. As we danced, he leaned close and whispered, "You are worth more than they could ever see." I swallowed the lump in my throat, letting his words stitch something back together in me. Later, beneath a canopy of stars, Adam pulled me close during our first dance. The laughter of our guests echoed around us, but in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of us. His hand was steady at my back, his eyes searching mine.
"Any regrets?" he murmured.
I thought of the note, of the sting of abandonment that had defined my life. I thought of the countless times I had tried to earn their love, only to be met with silence or scorn. And then I thought of this moment, the warmth, the joy, the freedom. "Only one," I whispered, that it took me 27 years to stop trying. Adam's smile was slow, tender, the kind of smile that rooted me in place. "You didn't need to earn love, Claire. You just needed to find it." And I had. As the night wore on, I realized something profound. My parents' cruelty hadn't ruined my wedding. It had revealed the truth. Love doesn't come from obligation, from blood, from tradition. It comes from choice. And standing there as Claire Whitaker, not Donovan, I knew I was no longer invisible. I was seen. I was chosen. I was loved. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.